So today we have Jonathan Sandler, Professor Jonathan Sandler from England. I was a fan of him before I was an orthodontist, and we met already more than 20 years ago. Jonathan, great to have you here. I want
Absolute
to
pleasure, Bjorn.
start with something different, not with AI, not with technology, but with a moment. You described lately, you gave me like a draft of an editorial, almost top secret. You described the moment in 1987 when you suddenly things became clear to you. What actually changed for you in that moment?
Well, the thing that changed, Bjorn, is that I'd spent 2 years with my basic orthodontic training at the Eastman Dental Hospital. And in those days at the Eastman Dental Hospital, there was only one camera in the entire department. And the camera was locked in a cupboard, and the professor of orthodontics had the keys to the cupboard. And we, as postgraduate students, as registrars, we weren't allowed to speak to the professor, but we could ask the senior registrar if they could kindly ask the professor for the keys to the camera cupboard. And very occasionally the camera was unlocked, and you got the opportunity maybe right at the beginning of treatment or right at the end of treatment to take photographs. And as a result of that, I would say orthodontics was something of a mystery. And Alison and I attended the very first straight wire course in London. And all of a sudden, John Bennett and Richard McLaughlin were showing the most amazing documentation of cases. And suddenly it became completely clear what we were trying to achieve with the initial aligning arch wires, what the stages in treatment were that we went through the initial alignment. We put in a slightly less flexible wire to get more alignment. Then we got up to our working arch wires, and then we started space closure. And it wasn't just a theoretical concept. We had the evidence in front of us. So suddenly you could follow a whole case all the way through. And they were reaching standards that I hadn't even dreamt were possible. And the clinical results that we saw, and also the documentation, changed my life forever. And it was almost from that course that I started taking photos almost every visit of every patient. And this is what I've worked with nearly 33 years of residents in my department here in Chesterfield. And this is what they're trained to do. Every patient, every visit, we take photos and we analyze the photos and we reflect on the photos.
Yeah, I remember that course with John Bennett and Rich McLaughlin as well. I took the course in 2001, and I
Mm.
was speechless because it was a total new level in simple things like
Yeah.
grinding a cusp. They did so clear photographs that I said, wow, that's fascinating, that's motivating. And I had similar feelings, and I thought, I want to get an orthodontist. I want to be one. It's super good.
Absolutely. And I'm sure it allows to have that time to reflect on the photographs. I'm sure on a visit by visit basis, it's such a learning experience. It allows the orthodontic trainee to grow almost exponentially. They can grow in their understanding and their comprehension of what's happening. And this is why well, as you know, I'm passionate about orthodontic photography. And I think this would be the one message I would give to any trainee. For goodness sake, take photos, but attach yourself to somebody who's interested in looking through them with you.
Yeah, yeah. When I was reading your draft, somehow you described photography as a kind of feedback loop. You stop guessing, you stop relying on your memory only, or what you imagine. I mean, we have so many colleagues out there that oh, I'm a good orthodontist because they are not taking photos because
Yeah, they say I'm too busy to take photographs of anything.
you see a cause and effect. You look at the cases and say, this worked, so you continue. This didn't, so I change. And you also realize what went wrong, even if it's uncomfortable.
No, I think we learn. I'm absolutely convinced we learn more from our errors almost than we
Yeah.
do from when it's going perfectly well, because you have the evidence in front of your eyes that what you did to that patient 6 weeks ago made things worse. Either you made no progress or you actually moved the teeth in the wrong direction. And this
Yeah.
feedback loop just confirms to you that, well, I won't do that again in future. I will try a
Yeah.
different track. And I just think it's absolutely invaluable teaching on a visit by visit basis. And this is why I still, at 68 years old, I still find orthodontics exciting on a visit by visit basis.
Yeah, yeah. I just said a mother a few minutes ago, and when I share that case tomorrow in the group, it was about a displaced canine, and we are just debonding the brackets. And the mother complained slightly, and then about the gingival margin, that it's not completely even, and if we could work on some details. And I said, I understand you, I see your perspective, but wouldn't you mind that we just go through the images and through the presentation? And then we went through 68 slides, and she said, "Okay, I'm fine. I'm
Yeah, I
happy with
submit.
uh, I don't mind about zero point 0.5 millimeter of gingiva anymore." I think it's quite good because
Yeah.
even the patient forgets where we come from.
Memories are notoriously
Yeah,
inaccurate, Bjorn. The patients forget, the parents forget, the dentist who refers the case forgets. And if you can just refer them back to the original situation, they see the transformation that you've managed to achieve with their child's malocclusion. And hopefully, as a result, they're enormously grateful and they will pass on that message to their friends, their colleagues.
yeah,
And this is how I'm sure this is how many people's business grows. And I think it repays you. I think the photographs repay you a
absolutely.
hundredfold throughout your career. And particularly if you want to do what you're doing with teaching all over the world. And I've had the privilege of being invited all over the world. And it's purely on the back of the documentation we have that people actually want to listen to us.
I really enjoyed when you gave the introductory course at the Engel
Mhm.
Society about photography, and you gave a lot of nice tips, which I finally stole from you for our office about the tools. How did the tools of photography change within the last 2 or 3 decades? Did you change a lot? Like, I'm still using the mirrors you
The
recommended because
Philtrop mirrors are
yeah,
fantastic. Mirrors that were sent to me from Liechtenstein,
yeah,
and
super.
they it just arrived on my desk one morning. Somebody in Liechtenstein heard that I was
Okay,
interested in photography, and they sent me these mirrors, and they said, "If you'd like to send us 300 American dollars, you can keep these mirrors and use them on your patients." And I wrote back to them before I unpacked them. I said, "If you'd like to give me these mirrors, then I will happily use them and I will let you know if they're any good." And again, that was transformational because they
yeah,
have these really big handles, and it means you can photograph any clinical situation. You can
yeah,
photograph well with the mirrors. And it's so important to teach the residents how to use the mirrors properly and how to use the retractors properly. There's so many different retractors on the market and you
yeah,
need to use them properly, but you need to work with your orthodontic assistant so that they
exactly.
can help you get the best quality photograph.
You have this article, I think it was published in 1993 in American Journal, where you compared three groups: a professional photographer, then the orthodontist, and the assistant, about the image quality and so on. And you somehow conclude there is not a statistical difference. So everyone can take photos if he is trained in. And do you still see the same? Like Dirk Wiechmann last week said, do you know where the most horrible photos come from? From university who have a photography department.
I couldn't agree more. There are university departments that have professional photographers, and the photographs are absolutely terrible. They're almost unusable in an orthodontic teaching situation. And I feel so sorry because in the United Kingdom there are a number of training places, a
Mhm.
number of training departments that don't allow the postgraduates to have their own cameras or have their own mirrors and retractors. They have to send the cases to the medical photographer. And the photos that, firstly, you have to book an appointment for the
Yeah,
photograph. So it
yeah.
means you can't
You're
have
not
photographs
spontaneous.
of
Yeah,
every patient, every visit. And also, the photographs are no good for two reasons. It's not because the photographers aren't trying their best, but they don't have high volume suction. I think
yeah.
high volume suction is absolutely critical. And they
Mhm.
don't have the various retractors, or perhaps they don't have somebody to assist them in doing the retraction. So they're relying on the patient. And I think it's difficult if you're relying on the patient all the time. So I
Well,
think the residents, any resident in training, they need to learn how to do the photographs. And that would be the one thing, it'll be the last thing that I ever delegate. I will delegate everything else in orthodontics, but not the photographs.
not the
So I
photo.
think they're so important.
Yeah. Which background are you actually using for the actual photos?
What I like to do is I like to use, it is actually a light box,
A
but
light bulb.
I don't turn the light box on. I just light the white Perspex background. But I
Okay.
also use a slave flash. So I have a slave flash behind the patient that discharges and illuminates the white Perspex behind
Okay.
the patient. And that's how you can white out the background. And that's what I like. It's a simple setup, and
Mhm.
I think it produces pictures of a quality that's satisfactory. If I could have my time again, we'd all love to wind back the clock 35 years. I think I would love to have a situation where I have big flood flashes. Some
Mhm.
of our colleagues at the Angle Society, they have fabulous flood flashes in
Yeah.
almost a photographic studio. And then it almost produces studio quality photographs, which are beautiful. But I work in a small polyclinic. There's barely enough room even for the slave flashes. So it
Yeah.
wouldn't work for me.
When I just come back to your article in the American Journal with the photographs and different levels of profession, and you gave later a lecture at the annual meeting about your most favorite articles or all your articles you have published and your evolution of publishing, and I enjoyed that so much. You published about tats, published a bit about self-ligating brackets and photography. How did you get stimulated, or what initiated publications? Feel it somehow came from you always from a clinical question or something
Yeah.
which came in your mind or was
Well,
relevant? And
I've
what
been
triggered you to certain topics?
I was really lucky in that I worked with two amazing clinical orthodontists who inspired me as to how interesting it was to write up cases, to publish cases, to take your photographs and then analyze them, but try and get them into publication if it's all possible. And there were two guys. There was a guy called Ray Reed who taught me the joy of orthodontics. And then there was a man called David DeBias, who David is Andrew's father. And I
And this
learned
is what I wanted to ask. Is
he
Andrew's
was
father?
he is Andrew's father, and I learnt all my clinical orthodontics from him. He was the best clinical orthodontist of his generation and a massive enthusiast. And he would any little clinical tip we had, any tricks and tips, he would always say, "Why don't we write that up in a journal? We have 3 or 4 cases. Just show the pictures, show them what you do." So he was the one who first inspired me to start publishing in the journals. And I've been publishing papers certainly every year since I finished my orthodontic training. Like you, it's almost an end in itself to have an idea, have a few cases that demonstrate the particular clinical technique, and then put it together as a package, information for our colleagues. Some of them will take it on board, some of them will ignore it completely, but that's fine. It's almost an end in itself to publish stuff, and also to help the young trainees, to inspire them to publish, which is exactly what you do. You like to encourage your friends and colleagues, and to be part of a research group that is publishing regularly is an end in itself. Again, it just means you have another string to your bow within your career to be able
Yeah.
to publish stuff and document stuff well.
And first I got to know you as a speaker when I was in the audience, and then for sure I found your articles, and later I met you as a wonderful gentleman in the Engel Society, and I was admiring your voice and your perfect English. But what is also impressive to me was the 2015 meeting of the World Federation of Orthodontics, which you hosted in London as a chairman, which was for myself personally the most impressive conference. How did you come into? I mean, that was the world meeting, and being the president, organizing it in London, in your home country, England. How did you open up that track, being involved in societies? I think you were almost 20 years something the president of the English Society. How
Uh,
did you come into that?
I was very fortunate that at a reasonably early stage in my career, I was invited to be the chairman of the British Orthodontic
Mhm.
Conference. And because I've been going to the Angle Society now for 33 years. And because of my Angle Society connections, I was able to invite some really exciting speakers to the British conference on 3 occasions, because I actually chaired the conference 3 years in a row. And immediately after the conference, my last conference was 2006, and in 2007, the president of the British Orthodontic Society said, "I have just one more little job for you. I would like you to lead a bid to see if the UK could win the World Conference for 2015."
Okay.
And in 2007, I remember being at a meeting in Seattle. I was at the American conference in Seattle, and they announced at the breakfast meeting of the WFO, they announced that that the UK had won that bid. Then from then on, excuse me, it was 9 years of really hard work. I had a fantastic team of people, and I brought together my team right from the start. I knew the people I wanted on the team, and we all worked together for 9 years putting that conference together. Kevin O'Brien was the
Yes.
scientific chairman, and Kevin and I have been friends since undergraduate years. We lived together as undergraduates, and we're still friends. We were out walking with Kevin and his wife only last Friday, and he was the scientific chairman, and between us, we picked, I think, 60 or 70 of the very best speakers in the world. And we managed to attract over 6,000 people to London. And
Brilliant.
it was a highlight of my,
Yeah. Yeah.
my conference organizing life. And it was wonderful. It was a joy.
With Kevin, for many years, you gave that course, orthodontics,
Art
science,
meets science. Yeah.
art meets science. Did you ever record it?
I don't think we did personally record the lectures. I know there were 1 or 2 people in the audience who surreptitiously recorded our lectures. Indeed, there was one guy who attended the course 6 years in a row. He came every single time, and I think he photographed every single slide we ever showed. And he now runs his own postgraduate courses very successfully. So
Yeah.
there we are. We obviously inspired him and helped him plan his material anyway.
Yeah, that
But
was
that was great fun. That was, again, another highlight of our teaching. We used to run that once a year, and I used to enjoy it enormously. And Kevin did as well, in his very modest way.
I mean, there is, I think, one of the most famous editorials we have in orthodontics. It was in the land of no evidence. The salesman is king. I think
Absolutely.
you get cited every conference
Yeah.
several times, and that brings us now to our next topic, because the World Federation of Orthodontic meeting was 2015 in London, and last year we were together in Brazil. And the topic has changed, and you were talking about AI versus the photography and everything. Where do you see the change between 2015, 2025 within our profession and salesman stuff, commercial stuff? AI is this, I don't know, the holy grail?
It is. I think it has been sold to us as the Holy Grail. It was initially sold saying that orthodontists would be able to work remotely, and the patients could take all their own records, and you would be sent these records over the internet, and it was going to shorten the treatments. It was going to reduce the number of visits. It was going to reduce the number of aligners that people had to wear, and it was going to speed up aligner treatment. And Philippe Sala promoted this, first talked about introducing AI back in 2014. And it's been a very interesting development, and I've been invited to speak about it on a number of occasions. We looked at the research, and there has been a fair amount of research done into the claims that are made. Ismail Hamza did a paper with Nick Vade. It was one of the first papers, and they actually looked at a series of 155 patients, and they found that whilst it did reduce the number of visits by 2 or 3 over a whole course of treatment, that the actual treatment was no shorter. There was no difference in the length of treatment. And there was a very interesting study came out of Harvard where they were looking at artificial intelligence monitoring clear aligner therapy. And it was particularly looking at the dashboard. People are encouraged to the dental monitoring system because it gives you an indication whether to go or no go, whether to proceed to the next aligner, or whether it isn't tracking properly and you have to wait. So you either get a red light or a green light. Now, Thomas Filito, under the careful, watchful eye of his departmental chairman, Mo Massoud, actually studied this scientifically. And
Mhm.
what they found, they measured the lack of tracking with aligners, and they actually quantified the distance of the tooth away from the aligner. And they measured all the distances when the patients had been given a go instruction. They'd been given the green light. And then they did exactly the same when the patients had been given a red instruction. And lo and behold, what they found is the measurements were absolutely identical. There was no
Oh,
difference whether you got a red light or a green light, which means that the instruction that the artificial intelligence was giving you at that stage of development was absolutely meaningless.
meaningless.
And the idea was that if you could proceed through the green lights quicker and quicker, then your overall treatment was going to shorten. Well, Linda Segali did a massive study where she did a systematic review, which involved, I think, nearly 7,000 papers were referring to tracking systems and artificial intelligence and remote monitoring. And what she found was that overall, there were a couple of visits fewer in the dental monitoring cases, but the cases didn't have any fewer emergency appointments, and the overall treatment time was identical. So these claims that people make, if you actually examine them scientifically and you look at the scientific evidence, they don't actually stand up to scrutiny. And there were two great papers also from Peter Miles. Yeah, you must know Peter
Yeah,
Miles.
sure.
He's spent his entire life producing world-class randomized clinical trials. So serious, hardcore science. And he did two studies with residents from, I assume, from Brisbane University.
Yeah.
And they looked at the quality of the treatment with clear aligner therapy using dental monitoring as opposed to conventional monitoring. And the pass score improvements were identical. There was no significant difference between the two studies. And they were great studies. So when you look at the evidence, there isn't much science that actually supports the use. So you then, as well as, of course, we have to look at the research evidence, but you also have to go to the clinicians as well. And I know a couple of clinicians who are using these. Paolo Manzo, a very good friend of ours, now a full member of the Angle Society of Europe, he did a great research study into this, where he compared the STL generated using the dental monitoring with a simple intraoral scan. And he was doing direct measurements. And there maybe is something in it because the measurements between the two really weren't that different. So there could be something in dental monitoring in the future, but we need to do more studies. We need to do more high quality studies. And
Yeah,
another guy who was using dental monitoring was Simon Littlewood, who's a very famous orthodontic speaker from the UK. And
absolutely.
Simon's using it in his particular department. And he thinks the main benefit of the dental monitoring is that it gives you a way of keeping on top of the patient's oral hygiene. Which and Paolo also says in Italy, oral hygiene is a big issue, and send the patient specific comments showing them pictures of their own teeth and gums, then maybe it makes an improvement. And anything that improves the patient's oral hygiene is a benefit, of course.
My personal feeling is like a gut feeling, and it's an episode in orthodontics, and it's good that we did a lot of research, and I think we had a lot of hope. And maybe you remember when we both evaluated the Theramon compliance monitor, the
I
microchip.
remember that well, yes. My
We
friend
were
Catherine Brearley did a study on the theremin and found that that had problems.
we were enthusiastic, but it remained like an anecdote. It remained like a research phase, but it never went. And I feel I had so much hope in my career, and I wanted to have help. You know, sometimes you're lost, and then you hope that there will be some next magic innovation. But actually, this is
It's always the fear of missing out, isn't it,
yeah,
Bjorn? You know, we
and it's
see something new on the market and you don't want to miss out using it.
But I think actually we should teach and force ourselves not to ask for help from AI or any company. We have to touch the patient. The same like with photography. You have to do it yourself. You have to work it up. It took me now more than 20 years to dare to work it up. I need to see the patient. I need to touch the patient. That's most important.
100% agree with you. That's how we look
Yeah,
after our patients. We have a
ex
responsibility for looking after these people.
yeah. Not
And
not
even
avoid
in this day and age, Bjorn, I'm so worried about the current young generation of kids. I
yeah,
think they've had their lives destroyed with social media. I genuinely do. And I think we have a safeguarding responsibility.
yeah,
And we are the people who are seeing these children every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks, throughout a very
absolutely.
sensitive period of their lives, that formative period. You know, if anybody's in a position to look after, take that safeguarding role, then surely the orthodontist is one of the few clinicians who could do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like that. I have it daily that I ask my receptionist out of a gut feeling, out of an emotion, please call that patient. I want to see her earlier. I want to do that. I want to interact. Yeah. And I think that is most important not to get distracted from our clinical work. Is it photography? If it's changing the arch wire, feeling it, seeing the details, the behavior. So I see there is some certain advantages of AI somewhere, but like with dental monitoring, I think it will take a similar career path as a Ceramon microchip. That's my personal
And
opinion.
you remember the other thing, the other great gadget on the market was that intraoral vibrator.
Yeah.
The
Sure.
patients were meant to suck on it for 20 minutes a day, and all of a sudden the treatment time was going to disappear in half, and we're going to be racing through treatment. And it never came to anything. And people were still selling these things to the patients, charging them 500 or £1,000 extra to bite on this thing for 20 minutes a day. And nothing ever came of it, to my knowledge.
And I think it distracts also from your self-confidence. I
Yeah.
think we as a clinicians, we should be confident enough. We have a good education, we have some experience, and it's us who makes a difference in diagnostic and treatment planning. I mean, you can use AI. Like now when we do that podcast, I do it with a software called Riverside. It helps me to finally polish that. It I would normally need 2 weeks and two employees. For that kind of auxiliary, I think
And it's
AI is good.
fantastic.
It's fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Just let it do the heavy lifting in that kind of situation. But to take
Exactly.
over our clinical treatment, I saw a job advertised recently in the WhatsApp group that was going around Nottinghamshire, where they were advertising saying that the National Health Service patients were all going to be signed up to dental monitoring. So you could do it was trying to get perhaps a mother with children who wanted only to work a few hours a week, and she could do all her orthodontics from home. And I think this is and I've heard a liner orthodontist say the beauty of the aligners is you only ever have to see the patient twice. Once when you sell them the aligners, and then right at the end of treatment, say goodbye to them. And there are
Yeah,
orthodontists doing this, and they think that's a good thing. Whereas I think the wonderful thing about orthodontics is that you get to see your patients every 6 weeks, and you
yeah,
can see how it's progressing. And if things are going wrong, I want to see where it's going wrong and institute a fix to whatever's going wrong as soon as I possibly can. I don't want
yeah.
them disappearing off for 3 months or 6 months and not being seen by a clinician. I think it's crazy.
I think these are marketing
Yeah.
slogans. Remember when the nighttime wire came up, there were these stories that the nighttime wire was put in and the lady went to jail, and 9 months later she came out of jail and the
With
teeth
straight
was back.
teeth.
I mean, at that time it was the super NASA nighttime wire. Now it's a liner. I mean, it's might be interesting anecdotes, but not very helpful for our everyday life. We are almost coming to the end. Two more questions. If you would have a young trainee, a young orthodontist, what would be your advice? Your one thing. I see the new generation grows up a bit with a lot of fear. What would you give them on their way about
Well, I
future of orthodontics, about the motivation to do it?
Well, I absolutely believe that orthodontics is the number one profession. I remember writing an editorial on this about 3 or 4 years ago. I think it's an absolutely brilliant job, and it can be as exciting as you want it to be. And if you're taking taking photographs on a visit by visit basis. Every time you sit in front of a patient, that's another learning opportunity. And to get that feedback loop, you either did something right or you did something wrong 6 weeks ago. And hopefully, you're going to spend more time doing things right, which will reinforce that behavior, and fewer times doing things wrong, but at least you will be made aware of that. And I think if they take photographs, they will make orthodontics the most exciting profession, and it will reward them handsomely.
Okay. Just a very personal question. Your wife, Alison, is an orthodontist. Your daughter, Cara, is an orthodontist. I don't remember what Luke's profession actually is, but
Luke is a doctor. He's an accident and emergency specialist, and he's coming to the end of his training very soon. And
okay.
I have to say that he is deeply cynical about the future of the health service and
Yes.
deeply cynical about medicine. And Benjamin, I can't remember if you ever met Benjamin. Benjamin, our youngest son, went through medicine, qualified as a doctor, and he's now given medicine up completely. He couldn't bear working for the National Health Service. So
Okay.
he's now living in Gibraltar, and he's working with PwC to do
Yeah.
his accountancy training, and he's loving living in Gibraltar. So
Okay.
he's having a great time now. So he's in a much better place. And Cara is an orthodontist coming to work with me very soon, coming to work with me and Catherine very soon, and Naeem as well. And she will benefit enormously, I'm sure, from she's going to be my final professional project. And I'm hoping I can teach her everything I know over the next couple of years, Bjorn. And
Yeah.
I'm
You
hoping that I can send her out to you for a week or two.
sure? We have very good wine, some nice rolls. Send her over anytime you want. Then
Fantastic. Thank
that
you
would
very
be
much.
fantastic. So let's conclude the podcast. Your career didn't actually change because of a new appliance. I mean, you did a lot of research in new appliances, but you, I feel you started seeing clearer. And the real question for us today, it's maybe not because what we can do with AI, it's more what we have to still train our eye. We still have to train our eye. And I think AI can show us a lot, help us now with the podcast and my grammar correction and whatever, but I think it will never replace how and what we see.
Absolutely agree with you completely. I think we need to be looking closely at what we're doing on a visit by visit basis and seek out the colleagues who aspire to the same standards that you're trying to achieve. You know, there are some people who are happy to disappear into the swamp of mediocrity, which is so
Yeah.
prevalent these days in every profession, but also in orthodontics. But there are some really special people who are, they are trying to reach the dizzy heights that Bennett and McLaughlin showed us all those years ago, Bjorn. And it gives us something to aim for. And I'm still aiming for it and still trying to get there on as many occasions as possible.
When you entered the Engel Society, which group were you in? What who were your classmates at that time?
Well, Marco, I think, was there a year ahead of me, and I developed a great friendship with Marco. Marco Rosa, one of the best orthodontists in the world, and he was absolutely inspirational. Monica Palmer, you know Monica ever so
Yeah.
well. Monica Palmer, an absolute inspiration. And she taught me not to compromise in the treatment standards. Bjorn Zackerson, an absolute orthodontic god, crazy guy, but boy, oh boy, did we learn. We learned everything from him, how to present, how not to present, because he'd come up to you. If you gave a bad lecture, he would come up to you within seconds and tell you exactly the 10 things you did wrong in the
Yeah.
lecture.
So
But boy,
true.
oh boy, did you learn from that. And the other inspiration clinically, of course, was Vince Kokic.
Yeah.
Vince was one of the most influential orthodontists I ever met, and absolutely brilliant.
But
So there's
coming
so many people. It's been a privilege being part of the Angle Society. So many brilliant clinicians, and I salute them all.
When there were not so many people from England over the years.
No, there weren't, sadly. Neville Bass very kindly invited me the first time, and John Bennett was a member of the
Yeah.
society for a while until he resigned. But then it wasn't until Julian and Andrew DeBias then came along that
Yeah.
we boosted the numbers. Ahmed Joal, of course, boosted the British numbers. And the group was looking healthy for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the English group,
Uh,
not only because of the perfect English, it was fantastic hours, but I think for the English, it's similar to the Germans. When I came to the first Engel Society meeting, it was intimidating to me
oh,
to
for sure,
to
for
to
sure.
to see the level of excellence. At first, it was not even motivating. I felt so little and almost in shock. It took me more than months, maybe years, to adapt and to find my own speed to deal with it and to
Mm.
live up. But it was an amazing experience.
Yes, it's been a fantastic journey over the last 33 years.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you, John, for that evening, for being
Bjorn,
patient and doing
absolute
all of
pleasure,
that
my
for
friend.
us in orthodontics and being such
Absolute
a good
pleasure.
friend.
And we will keep in touch.
Sure. I will
Okay.
stop now here. Have a super evening.
Fantastic. You too, Bjorn. Have a lovely evening and keep up the amazing work you're doing.